All right, greetings to all you accursed. Herle here with Reid, Leichnitz and Teneycke. I have to read that off my teleprompter here. Starting the pod today with a gracious nod to Stones Bay, one of our listeners who braved the labyrinth of the Apple podcast ratings and review protocols to leave us this sparkling diamond. Simply the best. No other political commentary in Canada like this one. Former political adversaries, now friends, deliver the straight goods without a whiff of punditry. Bawdy, funny, and completely serious. Listen and learn. Well, thank you for that, Stones Bay. I admire the hell out of you, too. God damn it, you guys, it's nice to read things like that, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah,
Sure
nice.
is.
Yeah.
I can't hear any reference to the phrase simply the best without thinking of the song Simply the Best, and without thinking, therefore, of Sheila Copps, who always used it as her leadership song. And I don't think she's simply the best. I still harbor resentments, and it bugs me.
Sheila Copps took a run at me in the Hill Times today.
I always had a soft spot for her. Maybe I'm going to have to reconsider that if she's taking shots at you, Herle. But look,
She took a shot at you, David?
Yeah, she took a shot at me in the Hill Times today. She was talking about I don't know, bad elections or whatever. And she said that Telford had run Wynn's 2014 campaign, but I ran the 2018 campaign. So,
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
having
That's
sent
all
Paul
news.
Martin back to the wilderness, I did the same with Kathleen Wynne. That was the Sheila Copps line today. So,
Remember when her official biography included a lengthy anecdote about how she had to intervene via fax machine to stop David Dodge from ending universal health care. It was only her intervention. It required the sitting governor of the Bank of Canada to issue a public statement saying, this is a fucking basket full of bullshit. And then her response was, well, it's my truth. Oh, okay. So your truth just doesn't correspond to objective truth or even slanted truth or even a kind of slightly rolled up and smoked it truth. Fucking...
Well, but let's say something nice about her if we can. She was a colorful character in a business where colorful characters are few and far between.
Yeah.
And
she also broke a path for a lot of women in politics.
Yeah, look, I don't know. I found her entertaining, and I think in opposition far more effective than in government, which is sometimes the case with colorful characters like that, like the Nunziatas and the Copps of the world. Great to have on your bench when you're in opposition, swinging haymakers and coming up with pithy sound bites. But that doesn't always translate to being a minister.
yeah, no, the Rat Pack were pretty effective against Mulroney. That's for sure.
Very true.
All right,
I'll
so
reserve my
here's a rundown
admiration
this
for
week.
people who are admirable.
What a week! What a week we've had. We'll start south of the border. Trump assassination attempt on the eve of the GOP National Convention. Jesus Christ. Unbelievable. And Biden's response. Where does all this go from here? Our cursed clipping is Campbell Clark's piece in the Globe and Mail. Is Chrystia Freeland on her way out? And why is the call coming from inside the House? And then, other than looking really weird in cowboy hats that don't fit right, is there any political value in attending the Calgary Stampede? And finally, Gordon Pinson chimes in from parts unknown for our Hey Yous. Jordan, Scott, Kory, I don't know even how to begin this particularly, because we're such cretins. I mean, there was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump over the weekend. It resulted in an extremely memorable photo with Trump defiantly raising his fist in the air, covered in his own blood. Many people will talk about the societal causes of this event, call for people to come together as a society. But this is the curse of politics. So we have to talk about the politics of this. At a time when the entire country is focused on Biden's frailty, this could not have been a stronger juxtaposition electorally. And Biden is hanging on, looking like he's going nowhere. Jordan, it really feels like the last couple of weeks have turned this race decisively in Trump's favor.
Yeah, I mean, so I will preface this by saying, as a millennial, I'm used to sort of unprecedented historic events, just walking through every month or so. That's really been my entire adult life. So, but this one definitely had. I was down in Washington when it happened, and you really did feel at least the political part of the city hold its breath, and people are waiting. They were waiting. The Democrats, sort of after Biden's disastrous performance in the debates. There's just a sense of everything was suspended and practically, as well as sort of as a metaphor, donations and fundraising had really frozen, and people were just waiting. They were waiting to see if Biden would get the memo, and if those around him would start to provide the advice to depart. And obviously, you can see a number of senior Democrats doing that publicly or behind closed doors, but there was this real sense of waiting. And I think what happened when the shooting at the Trump rally occurred is that people really felt like it took that immediately off the table. Like, there's now a sense that the Democrats can't go after Trump in the same way. They've pulled down their advertising. And I think you really see everybody reacting in the way we would if something like this occurred to any politician, which is appeals for unity, and sort of generally speaking, maybe with the exception of Trump's probable vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, most people talking about stepping back from the brink, which I think is an important instinct, but I don't think none of these things are going to help the Democrats. They are still in a really difficult situation. Look, I don't know what happens. I'm not maybe of the school of thought that thinks that this immediately secures Trump the election. I don't think we can predict that. I think he's going to certainly get a bump, but what he does with that is also a little bit unclear. So he may just talk shit, right? He may actually also take it too far now that there's focus back on him. So there are some ways in which he could squander whatever goodwill this generates for him. But I think ultimately what's going to be more significant is what the Democrats do. Like, if they decide to unilaterally disarm, basically, and lie down on the tracks, well, then they are truly fucked. And that will cement it. So there is now kind of a decision in front of the Democrats about what to do. How do you approach this in a campaign? Do you lay everything down? Do you stop speaking about Trump as an existential threat to democracy? Or do you find a way to deplore the incident and continue on a path of contrast? And do you continue to leave the question open about your nominee leading into the convention? I don't know.
Right. Jordan's right. Trump could manage to fuck this up somehow, but Scott is so perfect that a lot of Biden supporters were suspicious that it was staged at the first instance, because, it is going to help him politically, for sure.
Oh, yeah. My own belief is that Trump has survived the assassination attempt, but that Biden will not. And last week you asked us for predictions, and I thought, based on the way I saw the trend going, was that Biden was going to dig in, refuse to be removed, and would probably survive. And I don't think that's possible now. And the reason I don't is because I agree with your analysis, David. And I'll just seize, if I can, superficially, and I don't think it's superficial, I think it's profoundly important, but I'll seize on the photograph. That photograph, echoing as it does, visually echoing Iwo Jima, embodying everything that Trump could possibly hope to pour into the minds of American voters about himself. Defiant, physically courageous, overcoming others who stand against him, literally taking a bullet for his nation. It could not be more powerful. I don't know that there is a piece of propaganda, and I don't mean it pejoratively because it's earned propaganda. It reflects a real life moment, but I don't think there's a more powerful piece of propaganda in the post-Second World War era for politically, happening as it has in the midst of an election campaign where the country is divided, the voters are polarized, and the race is too tight to call. Now, I think you look at everything that's happened and you have to say to yourself, the thematics that flow from that photo, the fact that you're going to have 4 days of the GOP convention, the fact that Biden, in a call for rhetorical disarmament, makes it only possible for really the Republicans to go hard. Democrats have to withdraw. They can't make the existential threat, because smart Republicans were out yesterday making the point that when you say that Trump is an existential threat, you license extreme reactions. And that's not, and nothing in there is wrong. I think he is an existential threat to the United
hypocritical,
States.
but it's not wrong.
It's hypocritical, but it's not wrong. And so you have no choice but to withdraw. So I look at all of these things, and I think already he was leading in swing states. Already Biden's ability to sustain a campaign was burning. And now you're going to get 4 days of unadulterated, unbelievably pitch perfect, Hollywood scripted propaganda. And again, I don't mean propaganda in this cynical way. I mean, like, it's going to be powerful political communication, and it's going to be rooted in this searing event. And so the only play for the Democrats, once that's over, I think, will be, since they are going to have to step very carefully in the pointedness with which they attack their opponent, at least in the near term, but maybe it will have lingering effects throughout the campaign, then the only thing you can do is try to generate enthusiasm for your own option. And they can't do it with Biden. So in order to generate excitement and enthusiasm, I think they're going to have to go to him. I also don't believe that Hakeem Jeffries went to the White House on Saturday to talk about the weather. So I think that there may be some private movements that have been in play prior to this. But I think this is a devastating, significant moment. I know everybody says, oh, breathless pundits and all of that. What could be more breathless than this? If a scriptwriter offered this up as a storyline, a producer would kick them out of their office and say, go back and write me something plausible. Like, it's an astonishing swing of events.
Kory, do you know why he takes his shoes off when he's giving a speech?
I do not take, first of all, I rarely give a speech, and I always keep my shoes on. I don't know what you're talking about, David.
Well,
he wants to be earth grounded.
I wasn't aware that was what he was doing, taking his shoes off. Is that actually accurate? Or
no, when he says to the Secret Service as they're cutting, he says, let me get my shoes.
Well, I know. I think he had. Well, my understanding was he had a shoe knocked off when they took him to the ground, which seems plausible. I don't know what happens when a whole bunch of Secret Service people pile on top of you, but I'm guessing it's not an improbable outcome. Look, I think there's not a lot to add to what my friends have said here. Maybe underline a little bit how powerful images are in politics. Like, the image trumps the words. As much as we like writing speeches and crafting words, images are really the more powerful way of driving messages and themes in politics. And it's why we spend so much time doing events and thinking carefully about the images that we put out to the public during races. But you can't craft something like that, obviously. That is something that 100 years from now is going to be an iconic photo, an iconic image. Yeah. I heard Lindsey Graham on Meet the Press, liking it to Teddy Roosevelt, and there have been a lot of comparisons to Teddy made to Trump in the past, and I think they're apt, but that was a Teddy Roosevelt-esque photo. That was something that's iconic, and it's going to echo on through, not just through this campaign, but I think as the definitional photo of Trump. Raising his fist in defiance against the establishment, against the media, against those who oppose him, in a way that communicates well. This is, probably the most made for television president in the history of the United States. He came to this not because he had a support base within the Republican Party. He came to that position because he was operating in terms of communications and television as a medium and social media as a medium in a way that was just next level, like far beyond the pretenders who he was running against, and continues to do so. So look, I thought the race was over before this. I think it's absolutely over after this. I do think there is something to be said, like J.D. Vance's sort of the first out of the gates making the case that when you take political rhetoric to the point of, this guy is basically Hitler, you're going to get people who take actions like what we saw. And I do think there is a responsibility of people in politics to turn the level of volume down a little bit on this stuff. It is, it's not like it's only one side, it's both sides. And it's increasingly both sides here in Canada too. And that's really unfortunate. Like we've talked about this before. Fuck Trudeau stuff, not good. The fuck Harper stuff, not good. Like, I think that, we should all take a moment and pause and think a little bit about how far we take the rhetoric during campaigns, because if you let it go too far, this is a natural result that you're going to see coming out of it.
Well, just stick with you for a second, though.
We can't both sides it, though. Like, it's not the same, right? Trump himself led a violent insurrection against the U.S. government. Like, when Governor Whitmer was going to be kidnapped, he cheered that on. When Pelosi's husband was attacked, he made jokes about it. Like, this guy is not within the mainstream of what we would think of as regular political discourse. And he has regularly glorified violence in a way that you cannot compare to folks on the Democratic side. I think that both sides argument is absolutely wrong.
Well, only one side had their candidate shot, though, Jordan. So maybe
but we're talking about
that argument.
I'll make that argument any day, because this is about what he himself has said and what he views as permissible. Like, this is the guy who wants to come into office and be a dictator in his own words. Oh, but wait, just for a day, He's talked about putting his political opponents up on military tribunals. This is not normal shit. And I really do think that when we start to inscribe it in this like both sides argument, it's incredibly dangerous. We cannot treat him as a regular political actor. He is absolutely something else.
I want to weigh in on this too, just for the record. I 100% agree with Jordan. And what sticks out to me in particular is his reaction, the venality of his reaction to Paul Pelosi's attack, and the way in which he rejoiced and cheered it and treated it as though it was a hilarious, funny event. And my point is this is a candidate who has consistently for years encouraged violent rhetoric and action, even against his own vice president. And so it is unsurprising that we end up in a place where violence expresses itself in the political arena. All that being said, none of it is now available, at least not in the terms that Jordan and I are using.
You can't make these arguments. You can't make these arguments publicly right now.
You can't. We can make them on a podcast, and Kory will disagree with us, and we could go back and forth, get as heated as we like. But it's now, these arguments are, I think, largely, at least in the immediate term, unavailable to the Democrats. And that's,
I think they must. I really think they must. This is not a normal time.
I don't think that, like, that might be cathartic for you and others who are making those arguments, but they're not persuasive to anyone that you need to persuade. I think they actually isolate you from the vast majority of people in the United States who do not like seeing presidential candidates shot at. And taking that.
Neither one of us said that we do.
I want to be really clear.
Neither one of us said that we do. That's not fair to equate what we said with encouraging violence.
We do.
Well, it kind of.
But also, we can speak clearly about the stakes of what's going on.
Okay, well, all right. Well, that's you're moving out of political strategy and punditry and into making emotional
I actually think it
arguments.
is about political strategy, because if you look at the challenges that the Democrats have in front of them, one of the biggest ones is they have got to motivate their vote. And there is nothing that is going to do that, like talking about the stakes of this election in realistic terms.
All right. Okay, well, good luck with that, is I guess all I'll say, because I think most people think that, and you're seeing it, argument being made by, frankly, the Democrats as much as the Republicans, that it's time to take the volume down on some of the rhetoric. And so if your advice is to go and turn up the rhetoric even more, be more hyperbolic about it, I don't think you're really, you would really be giving very sound political advice to the Democratic campaign right now in doing so, because I think, you would be way off what the mood is.
This is why I think Biden is euchred, because, your inability to make these arguments to try to motivate your own base, the 41% say of American voters that do agree with these statements and would react to that, even in the face of recent events, you just can't make that argument. So then you have to find some other way to generate organic enthusiasm. And I don't believe it can flow from the performance of Joe
organic
Biden.
enthusiasm for Joe Biden. Which,
my argument is that the Democrats should not unilaterally disarm. That's my advice.
I just want to say that one of the things I find interesting about this is we could not really find right now a Canadian political subject that would get us this heated. This is an example of what the stakes are down there, that everybody is on the knife's edge about this. So there's a series of worldwide, superfast, open-wheeled races I'm not allowed to refer to by name, lest the lawyers turn the hurly-burly into the hurly-barely. But one of them was just run in Montreal, and it's key to this next installment in our summer of fascinating and very useful tech from our presenting sponsor, Telus. Who's ever heard of a thing called network slicing? No? Let me help. I'm staying with the automobile theme here. Imagine a highway with multiple lanes, each reserved for different types of vehicles. One for emergency vehicles, one for carpools, one for regular cars, one for 1970s wood-paneled station wagons. Forgive the tangent, I have a thing for vintage station wagons. The point is, the whole setup makes for smoother travel for everyone. Network slicing works similarly, but in the digital world. It divides a single physical network into multiple virtual networks, or slices, each customized for specific needs and services. One might prioritize speed for gaming. Another ensures better reliability for emergency services. But the whole thing greatly improves network performance. Back to Montreal's big race. Telus' very own pit crew created a special 5G priority payment slice. Think of all the concessions and merchandise sales for the massive crowds on site. It was a huge success. Speeds on the slice were faster than the general network traffic, with no interruptions and a minuscule failure rate over 3 days of the event. It's really just the beginning, hurly-burlyites. Telus is now exploring network slicing for nationwide digital payment services and event experiences, including the 2026 FIFA World Cup. That's weird. I guess I can call that one by name. Lawyers, don't come at me. But Jordan, you said you've been down in Washington. The debate is now 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Right? And, I mean, if anybody thought they were going to get a sign or a signal from a special Oval Office address last night, they got the "I'm here and I'm staying" signal. Is that really what's going to happen here? Is Biden going to be the Democratic candidate?
That seems to be the way it's going. And I think that there's some other strategic considerations other than this ballot. And this is part of the problem. There's some perverse incentives here arguing against changing him, which is that if you are a leading light in the Democratic Party and you want to make a run, people don't necessarily want to do it where they may lose to Trump in such a close election. They also want to block Harris from becoming the presidential nominee, because if they do, if she is successful, then she also takes 2028, right? So if you're Gavin Newsom, if you're Gretchen Whitmer, if you're some of those other folks whose names are very likely replacements, maybe you want to let this one ride and you want Biden to take the loss, and then that opens up the ticket in 2028. So there's three-dimensional chess being played here also internally.
But then you obviously don't believe that Trump represents an existential threat.
Well, or you do, or you view it in context with your own ambitions, right? Like we're all still in politics, right? So I think that there's some really complicated internal forces that are shaping these conversations. And I think the other thing that's really important to remember is there is no Democratic Party as a unified entity. There's no one person who's in charge of making this change or making this happen, right? It's 600 people and they're all going off in different directions. And at the end of the day, it's really the people immediately around the president who have the influence on him about whether he is going to step down or not. And right now they are telling him not to. And so and I find what's really interesting too within the Democratic Party as a whole, you don't see, for example, the left wing of the Democrats, like they're not out there kind of holding the knife against Biden. Like they're waiting, right? They're waiting to see what mainstream Democrats, what, the consultants who orchestrated all of this, like, what are they going to do? And all those folks are also now waiting. So we're really in this untenable place. And part of it also has to do with like the distance between the unscripted offense that Biden does, right? Like you had almost a full week between the debate and when he gave the press conference after the NATO summit. And so now each and every one of these unscripted events where he doesn't have a prompter is being read as this test about how you view him. Yeah. And so this is also it's really dragging out this whole situation. In a way, I agree, it's completely untenable. But I have to say, like, overwhelmingly, the mood was dismal. People feel very defeated. They feel very powerless, and they feel like there's not a clear path for them in order to regain control of this cycle. And that was not reassuring.
Kory, what do you think?
Well, I think somebody is in charge of the Democratic Party, and I think Jordan's not correct about that. It's the president of the United States. It's whoever's the top of the ticket for each of the parties that is largely in control. They're in control of the RNC or the DNC. They're in control of the largest pipelines of money. They are the top of the ticket that pulls or drags the rest of the ticket. And so there is somebody in charge. And the person in charge is Joe Biden in the case of the Democrats. And what he decides to do is what goes. Like the way, there isn't a lot of latitude, depending on your reading of the rules, for delegates to go some way other than the way that they've been pledged as a result of the electorate, selecting them to be a representative. So, for there to be a change, realistically, Biden has to step down. And all indications now are that he's not. I think, the events of around Trump around the attempted assassination probably reduced the likelihood that he's going to go. But he wasn't exactly sending any signals, nor was this inner circle that they were going to leave. You had everybody, off the record saying there's no path to victory. But you still had them locked in place that he's going to stay. So the person in charge of the party says he's not going anywhere. And so unless that, up until that changes, Biden's the candidate. I do think we should point out some of the other events, because before the assassination attempt, I think this is what we're going to talk about. His press conference was a disaster, right? And question number one, he couldn't get right whether Kamala Harris was the vice president that he chose, or whether it was Vice President Trump who he selected. Like the number of gaffes coming out of this guy's mouth. Well, the
Zelensky Putin thing was terrible.
And that was right on the heels, like both in the same day. He couldn't get Zelensky and Putin straight, and he couldn't keep Kamala Harris and Donald Trump straight. Like it verges on elder abuse right now, watching this guy campaigning. Like it is the worst candidate and the worst campaign I've seen in U.S. presidential politics in my lifetime. Even the parts of
how could they be seeing it differently, Kory? I mean, I'm sorry, but that's so fucking obvious.
It is so obvious.
That is so fucking obvious that how can they be seeing it differently? Like, how do they see Biden being able to carry this campaign to Trump over the next number of months? What's he going to be like in October? And is anybody seriously anticipating that he will be running the country a year from now? Like, come on.
It's hard to seriously contemplate him running the country today.
Right.
Like, I don't think it's possible. Like, he is a very managed candidate, and I think he's a very managed president. But look, even if you look at the best parts of that press conference, where he seemed to know what the topic was and was trying to make points on it, they were made in a feeble voice, tentatively, in sentences that were at times almost nonsensical. Like, he is, even where he seemed to be in control of the topic, he was among the worst communicators I have seen ever. like this guy, you wouldn't hire him to do anything at this point. Like, certainly not in any senior role. He is not an effective communicator at any level at this point. There's an argument that he was earlier in his career, though never the best political communicator. Like, he actually had some game. He has no game right now. None.
I agree.
Scott, that team around him should go down in infamy.
Well, again, I know I'm up and down like a dog's ass. We talked about this last week, and I predicted that he would soldier through and remain in place. But because of the self-apparent truth of what's being said here, and it can't be just true of a few people in Zoom boxes from Canada, it must be true to the most powerful and important and concerned people in the Democratic Party. I believe that all of this, compounded by the political consequences of the assassination attempt and the compounding effect of the GOP convention, means that he will have to depart. That if they have to pry him out, if they have to hold public news conferences with 40 legislators, that is going to have to happen, because this can't be allowed to persist. Now, the great asterisk to that is, what if we're all wrong in our assumptions? What if the reality is 3 days after the convention that the polarization of American politics is so profound that it reasserts itself and you end up with 41-41 across the board, and we're told that 17,000 people in 6 states are going to decide this fucking thing? Then maybe that gives Biden the room to fight. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think this situation is dire. I think Democrats will have to act, no matter how powerful or unpleasant. And I also believe that Hakeem Jeffries, I come back to it, I believe that Hakeem Jeffries visiting the White House privately and emerging to say, we discussed a path forward, and that's all he would say, he would not endorse the president's position as the nominee. I think that's consequential. And so I think these things may be more in motion than we know or think.
I hope. But wait a second. Right. Wait a second, folks. The polls don't have to move a lot, and they probably can't move a lot more because of the polarization of the United States. But let's look at where things are at, right? If Biden is down by 2 or 3 points nationally, that compares to 4 years ago on this date, he was up 8 in what was still a close election.
For sure. All those national polls mean sweet fuck all.
So down 3 is a fucking disaster, right?
Especially if it means that he's losing Pennsylvania and Michigan, right? Like in Wisconsin.
It's not going to be a close election if it were held tomorrow. Like, and the polling since the debate indicates that. Yeah. Like there was a 3-point move.
Okay.
So right now it's a Trump landslide is what it is.
But before we get to...
Let's just be clear. It's a Trump landslide right now. Before
we mire ourselves too much, 3 months is also a long time. And I think the last few days have shown us...
It's going to be a very fucking long time.
That's
Jordan.
right. It's going to be a very long time
of suffering and misery.
Breaking news.
It can get bigger.
Breaking news. That fucking, that judge that was reviewing the classified documents case, who's had all those crazy rulings and so on, she just dismissed the classified documents case, ruling that Jack Smith's appointment was unconstitutional. I mean, literally, Donald Trump has been given total immunity. His opponent has been exposed as senile in that debate. He survives the assassination attempt and is handed that photograph. And now he gets this. I mean, and he's got a 4-day commercial coming with the GOP convention. It's clearly, when
Karma's
he argues there's divine intervention,
there's nothing that Americans love more than
God. I'm going to correct you on something. He wasn't given that photograph. He created that photograph. He's got instincts, and he's got game for this kind of thing. He didn't cower down there and let them whisk him away, right? He didn't, like George W. Bush put on a flak jacket to go throw out the opening ball and not make it to home plate. He knew what image he needed out of that.
No question. He's got genius feral instincts on this. And right. I mean, that's what made him such a compelling person on reality television. It's what makes him so compelling in this circumstance. And Biden, at his best, I'm not certain can match it. And certainly he's not at his best.
There's still time for Biden to withdraw. That could shake up this race significantly. And I think we have to hope that that's what happens.
I want to talk for a minute about sustainability. I know that word can often smack of virtue signaling, but what I want to talk about is no joke. It's not like we have to look very far these days to see the damage climate change is inflicting. So much of the world, to quote a book, is hot, dry, and flat. Remember the old advice from decades ago? Think globally, act locally? Well, our sponsor, CN, is trying to do just that. CN is, pretty huge. It has a carbon footprint like any other big company, and it is shrinking it. Basically, the railway has concluded that the single most effective thing it can do is to improve locomotive operating efficiency. That is happening. Since 1993, locomotive carbon emissions are down 43%. CN trains are consuming 15% less fuel per gross ton than the industry average, and carbon reduction from electricity consumption at CN rail yards is down 33%. There are all sorts of methods at play here, using fewer trains to move more cargo, driving efficiency across the supply chain, using leading-edge tech, and upgrading the CN fleet. As you might expect, there's a grand plan behind all this. CN wants to reach net zero by 2050 and is taking a science-based approach to accomplish that. Every year, it publishes its progress using various metrics. It's happening. 17% here, 20% there, even 30% of the goal has been reached according to certain measures. And CN has managed to divert nearly all the waste it produces away from landfills. Oh, it's also in the process of planting 3 million trees within the next 6 years. This stuff is about as serious as it gets. CN has neither the ability nor the inclination to hector or push other big players in the North American economy to preserve our world for our kids. It's just doing what it can and following the plan. All right, let's wheel around to Canadian politics, you guys. And our clipping of the week, our cursed clipping, is from the reliably smart Campbell Clark at the Globe and Mail. And Campbell writes about, we all heard the facts last week that there were leaks in the Globe and Mail that PMO didn't think Freeland was any good at her job, bad communicator, etc. And then the Prime Minister came out and, there was a rote denial by news release and then some kind of denial from the Prime Minister. So here's where Campbell picks all that up. But rest assured, it's all part of a cunning plan. Mr. Trudeau and his PMO apparently think it might be time to put a new face on the Liberal government's economic message and changing the cabinet's most prominent minister. And that's exactly what many Liberals wanted Mr. Trudeau to do a year ago, before the Liberal slide in the polls became a downward spiral that now appears to spell political disaster. Instead, Mr. Trudeau shuffled some of the less prominent players in his cabinet last July, bringing in new faces in mostly peripheral roles without any coherent message about a change in approach. Replacing Ms. Freeland doesn't seem like enough of a game changer now. Liberal support has fallen deeper. The party suffered the shock of losing a safe riding in Toronto St. Paul's. Irritation with Mr. Trudeau has spread wide. Ms. Freeland's style comes across as condescending to some, but that's a subset of irritations with the Trudeau government that are now personified by Mr. Trudeau. But if Mr. Trudeau and his Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, huddled to go over the options that Liberals have mooted to turn things around, the Prime Minister resigning, the Chief of Staff resigning, or the Finance Minister resigning, door number 3 might be a popular choice. It wouldn't be a simple plan, however. For one thing, Mr. Carney has balked at joining Mr. Trudeau's government for years. It seems unlikely that it would be a much more appetizing prospect now, when the government's popularity has sunk and there have been calls from Liberals for Mr. Trudeau to quit. Of course, Ms. Freeland could be replaced at finance by another MP in a shuffle. There might be more changes to the team. A year ago, a number of Liberals were hoping Mr. Trudeau and his inner circle would formulate an assertive plan for a reboot. Now, there's just desperation to do something. Now, Scott, I was inclined not to put too much weight on the leaked comments from unnamed people about the PMO, but Trudeau's comments took me aback. What's going on here?
I don't know, and no one does. And the PMO, for the record, I've heard from people, they've insisted that their intention and Trudeau's intention was to signal 100,000% support right down the line for Freeland. That's the beginning of it. That's the end of it. And there's nothing more to it. And the fact that he came out after issuing a statement was intended to signal the depth and intensity of that support. Okay. But I would tell you this, and we all know it. And I was also told if you listened to the entire press conference live, you couldn't help but come away with that impression. But of course, nobody listens to a whole press conference live. And let's be honest, right? Clarity is the obligation of those who send the message, not those who receive it. And I think when you look at what's happened here, it is a real choose your own adventure crisis communications effort. That his speech could mean, one, that Freeland is staying right where she is, God damn it. And Carney's a great guy, and I hope he gets into politics someday. It could mean, two, that Freeland is staying right where she is, God damn it. And if you have been wondering whether it is the Prime Minister's fault that Carney is not in cabinet, well, fuck off, because he's been invited in a bunch of times and it sits squarely on him. Or possibility number three is that they are signaling, yeah, Carney, talented, capable, preconditioning for the potential departure of Freeland, even though it's absolutely denied. So that's the circumstance you're left with. A lack of clarity. Three viable options as to what those comments meant, and no real way of discerning all of that other than we lumber day by day forward, waiting to see what, if anything, will happen. It's been a month since St. Paul's, or almost a month, and literally nothing has changed. When asked about what they're doing, the Prime Minister's response remains, look, tough loss. We are taking stock.
You know they're really close to the Biden people, right?
Right. Completely. We're having these conversations. And meanwhile, we're delivering on the things that matter. And they give the same list of things that got rejected by voters in Toronto, St. Paul. So, there's only really one issue here, which is, are they going to attempt to make any changes whatsoever? Whether it's cabinet, whether it's policy, whether it's carbon tax. Jesus Christ, carbon checks go out today. Thank you. Yes, money in people's pockets. And a reminder that the carbon tax exists, as if filling up your gas tank wasn't reminder enough. If they're not willing to make any changes. Is there a note
that comes with it that says, it's more than you paid, believe us?
Yeah, honest to Pete.
Trust us.
So, that's where we're at. I don't really, the fundamental core issue remains that this striking political event of the St. Paul's by-election loss has occurred, and they have done nothing in the aftermath of it. Therefore, they remain on the same trajectory. Therefore, no matter what they say, it's statements and press conferences and newsers, and none of it fucking matters, man. Because if you're not going to make any changes, don't expect anything to change.
Yeah.
So, Kory, just one tiny aspect of this, which is to say, we drag Freeland through the fucking mud every second week on this program, but there's no need for the PMO to do that, is there? Even if they were going to bring in Carney, there's no advantage to diminishing Freeland, is there?
I took it as a bit of a blame game around the by-election result. I think finger pointing internally is going on, and because of who the candidate was and her close association with Freeland, there's I think that's been an element of the finger pointing. And look, there is a deeper truth, and we've talked about it many times before. For all the positive things you can say about Freeland and her intellect and there are a lot of positive things to say about her, but one of them is not as a communicator. As a communicator, she's been I think a pretty unmitigated disaster for them. I don't get her communication style. Comes across to me as condescending and on the verge of baby talk to the electorate. Around issues of substance. So, look, I don't think there's anything wrong with the assessment saying that a change there is required. But I think it's a year late. I think that change last summer might have helped change the trajectory here in a considerable way, and might have helped save the Prime Minister. The decision not to do it, I think, can't be revisited in a way that's going to have the same sort of effect on the outcome. It's too little, too late now. I think the lens is focused far more on Trudeau now. I think the obvious answer to Canadians is replace Trudeau, not replace Freeland. But replacing Freeland, probably not a bad idea. I don't know. Who knows what's really going on in the inner sanctum there? But I think it's fair to say that there is widespread criticism of Freeland and her ability to communicate and a desire to see a change there. I just don't think that's where the desire for change stops. I think that's where it begins. But I think it goes far past that.
Okay, so as Kory was talking, Jordan, here's what was going through my head, which is, okay, she's a shitty communicator in the sense that she has a way of talking, as Campbell Clark said, that can sound condescending. She's got some nervous tics that are off-putting. She can say things that are sort of politically inept, like the Disney thing, Disney Channel thing, etc. But fundamentally, let's say you put the greatest communicator in the world in there. What are they supposed to say? Like, what is the government about? Like, what would a good communicator be communicating right now? What is the economic strategy of the government? What is the plan that the government has for Canada? What is this important work that Trudeau needs to stay around to do? Like, so you can't just put a good talker in there. What the fuck is the message?
Yeah, I think you're bang on. And my first take about this, if you look at the comments, of course, the anonymous comments about her being ineffective in selling the government's message and also failing to win over her caucus colleagues, it's like, well, yes, but also guess who else is an ineffective communicator and failing to win over his caucus colleagues? The fucking prime minister. Right. And so you could move Freeland out, but without addressing the lack of a compelling central message for this government and without addressing the major communications challenges that the prime minister shares, I don't think you're actually going to shift anything. So I guess what I would say is, and I agree with what Kory says, that a year ago, this maybe would have been somewhat impactful. Now I'd say it's probably necessary but not sufficient to move her out. But look, the replacement optics are not great either, right? So, okay, are you going to bring Carney in for real? There's really nothing to indicate that Carney would be interested in joining, because of course that would sort of call his bluff about whether or not he wants to enter into.
He's in Britain playing pickleball with Keir Starmer.
He's got options than joining the dying days of a failing government. And okay, so all right, if not him, then what? Wilkinson, Champagne, these are not people who are going to fix your communications problems, my friends. No. So I'm not sure that it's going to result in anything change because the government and the PMO has made no change to their core message. So I don't think it's going to get them where they think they want to go. I also think, just as an aside, and maybe this is a little bit Pollyanna, but this sort of whiny anonymous source complaining about somebody who really has been a loyalist, regardless of what you think of her performance. She's there because the PM put her there. She's taken on those roles because the PM did. She has been absolutely loyal to him. It's just a fucking shitty thing to do. There's a million ways to precondition moving somebody out that are more graceful and more humane than this. So I also just think it's a little bit fucked up that that's the way that they're going about this. And I think it also maybe...
Nobody leaves happy from that place.
No, but there are better and worse ways to do it. And this is definitely among the worst. And I think particularly...
No, I mean that particular place. Nobody leaves happy.
Yeah, of course, right? And the fact that it echoes so closely what was done to Bill Morneau, even though some of the other circumstances are different... it's just tactless and dumb. There's no need to create that kind of animosity. Even if you want to move somebody out, you can do it in a better way. So I also just thought that was really artless and kind of shitty.
Yeah. If they're not going to do anything different, then
why?
If I conclude they're counting on Trump.
Yeah, that's their hope. That's their hope, and we talked about this before. But I think it's a fool's hope. It's not realistic hope. And this is also, as we talked about around election timing, why I think Trudeau isn't going anywhere until, well into the new year, because that is really the hope they're pinning this on. However, I think if Trump is in, that means, Biden probably stayed on the ticket and probably got his clock cleaned. And I think the lesson for people are going to be, if you overstay your welcome in the way that Biden did, brackets Trudeau is doing, then it's not going to work out well for you. And so I think it's only going to increase the pressure on him to leave after. Let's also talk about what's happening in the spring. They're going to raise his carbon tax again. So I think by the time that's happened in April, like you're not going to be able to find, anybody outside. Not
in Atlantic Canada. Their tax doesn't go up again until after you re-elect the Liberals.
Yeah, David, it is region neutral. There are more people in Ontario affected by that policy than Atlantic Canada. Please rely on the facts.
How dare you insinuate that there could be politics behind
the fact that it's announced with the Atlantic Caucus standing behind them is just a trick of optics. Can I just add one thing, which is, I mean, and we're all saying, I think fundamentally the core thing, which is like, it's shitty. Whatever's going on, it's being done poorly, and maybe unfairly. I think to Freeland, no matter what you think of her skills, and it's all fundamentally highlights that, like, who gives a fuck what you say? What are you doing? What is the change going to be? What is if you're going to alter your economic offering, if you're going to announce soon that raise next April 1st isn't going to happen, like, what is it you're up to? So that's that. I would just say one other thing. The reason you get stories like this, no matter how accurate or who the real sources are, or whether it's like all that sort of stuff, it happens because there is a vacuum, because there's a desire in the aftermath of St. Paul's for people to see some evidence of change, some plan, some holy fuck, man, pull the fire alarm. We've got to do something now. Put on your red boots, get on the truck, grab the Dalmatian. Let's go. There's a burning blaze here. And no one has done anything. And so people start talking to reporters and people start saying stuff. And this is what happens when you leave a vacuum. It gets filled. Sometimes with irrational, unhelpful, crummy stuff.
All right, let's move to our last topic quickly, which is just a little bit of fun, which is Calgary's been hosting its annual rodeo for the past couple of weeks. Much was made of Trudeau's decision not to go. Some people also noticed that Singh wasn't there. Lots of politicians do show up, though. And those two have done it in the past. Mm-hmm. The question is, why? I think it's probably of some political import in Calgary that you showed your face and were there, but I can't imagine that the impact goes any further than that. Kory, do you have a different take on that?
I'm probably not allowed to say this. I'm not a huge Stampede fan. I kind of view it like Vegas. It's good.
You wear chaps for a whole other reason.
I want to see your Stampede outfit, Kory.
Of course, it's well appointed. I'm not. If I'm going to do cowboy cosplay, I'm going to do it well.
Yeah. Kory and I are, of course, part of the Saskatchewan, Alberta farmers versus cowboys dynamic.
I understand it well.
They're all posers as cowboys, but we know we're fucking farmers, right?
Yeah. But I like a Stetson as well. Like I'm not gonna knock it, but I think it's just a party, right? And it's a weird thing, and especially in our business. It's like all of Ottawa relocates to Calgary for a few days, gets drunk together, dresses up in cowboy cosplay outfits, and then goes back to Ottawa. And
tries desperately to get a politician to come by their suite.
Yeah, and so there are less expensive ways to do a photo op with Danielle Smith or whoever the premier of Alberta is at the time. So I've never really seen a huge benefit, and I've actually seen a lot of mockery. Like there were a couple of times when Harper in particular had some real misses on the cowboy get-ups, and it launched about 1,000 memes of around it. So
the leather vest, man, the leather vest was a killer.
Yeah, it's
pleatherette.
It didn't have the desired effect in the LGBTQ community that we were hoping for.
You really should have taken some notes from Jack Layton, who was like,
"I'll turn off,
much more
no
like
turn
right
on."
For that audience.
I think for conservatives it plays maybe a little differently because Alberta is still ground zero for the conservative base in Canada, and I think going and appearing there is probably more important. I don't see a big benefit for Singh or for Trudeau, and I actually see risks. I think if Trudeau went this year, the chances that he would have been booed and had things thrown at him would have been very high. So I think I would have done.
Fuck, he got booed at a Stones concert last week in Vancouver.
Yeah. Well, you.
Speaking of overstaying, right. You're welcome.
Well,
hey.
Even on the curse of politics, I'm not going to make the obvious jokes about the Rolling Stones and the Trudeau family and how intimately some of the members of the band are familiar with members of the Trudeau family. But so in the interest of good taste, we'll sidestep that. But I think going to NATO was probably
very tastefully
the right
executed.
call for him. Yeah, not tastefully at all. I do always remember that, the day after Trudeau was first elected, watching Fox and Friends and Geraldo Rivera basically saying on air that, hey, love the Trudeaus had sex with his mom in Central Park one night. It was terrible, absolutely terrible. Anyway, look it up.
Maybe you need better TV, Kory.
Well, I don't know what that. I want to quarrel with your introduction, David. I'll quarrel with your introduction. You said that there were people who were upset about the fact that Trudeau wasn't attending Calgary Stampede, and also some people who were upset that Singh wasn't.
I said they noticed it.
I didn't see anybody who mentioned this thing. I refuse to believe there was a constituency of people who are upset by it. I would just say this: Calgary Stampede's fun, man. It's fun party. It's fun thing to do. What's its political payoff? Probably it signals that you're willing to be national in your scope, even if you're one of those big, ugly Central Canadians who wanders in from Quebec or Ontario. And, there are moments when that can be to your advantage. Trudeau did use it to his advantage early in his leadership and, early on to try to demonstrate that he wanted to set a different tone, that he wanted to reach out. And listen, man, he won seats in Alberta.
Especially after, do you remember when he forgot to say Alberta in the Canada Day speech? And then he was like, I guess I'm going to go to Stampede now, even though he wasn't in 2017. I remember that.
But, I enjoyed Poilievre's white hat, white shirt. Looked like somebody had ironed it onto him. That's some look he's going for there, man.
Yeah. I mean, I think Poilievre was probably the one who got the most enjoyment and the most mileage out of it this year. That's for sure. Look, I think
flipping pancakes in a white shirt is a brave thing to do, isn't it?
How do you flip
pancakes? Is it full contact in your house? I don't know.
If we want to get into the nitty gritty of the Stampede photo op, actually being able to flip a pancake properly isn't the easiest thing in the world.
You got to practice that shit.
And there is a bit of a competition around that.
There totally is.
I saw some good footage comparing the Poilievre excellent pancake flips to the not so great Trudeau ones. I think it's a thing.
But look, I think here's the thing. If you're, I'm going to just ignore Scott. Stampede is fun if you're winning. If you're not on the upswing, it can be rough, right? So I don't think there's any advantage in going if you're in the shitter, particularly in Western Canada. Why go? Why subject yourself to that?
So it does really show, Jordan, how far we are from 2015. When the Trudeau people were excited about Calgary, excited about the prospects in Alberta, were going out there and giving speeches and going to things like Stampede and really trying. And now, 10 years later, it's like, fuck that place, man.
A lot of awkward questions, of course, also because of Chanel and the comments coming particularly from his own
Coco
MP.
Chanel or George Chahal?
Chanel. Yes. George Chahal. It's hard when your local MP specifically is calling for, it's going to lead to all sorts of awkward questions.
He's calling for a meeting.
Well,
he's calling for a meeting.
Back the fuck up, George.
It's not a meeting. It's not a generic meeting, But the other thing I will say, and I think that, this has been spoken about earlier, but it is actually quite stressful for Central Canadian politicians to dress for this thing. It's a resource intensive. There's ways to screw it up. So sometimes there can be downside risk to attending if it's not really in your wheelhouse
People
already.
have to go out and buy a pair of jeans for it, and they're wearing that stiff denim for the first time it's ever been worn, and they're limping around.
It's and you got to strike just the right balance. And so I do think that when you consider, like, is this the best use of your principal's time? Like, there's going to be political moments and where people are just going to say, no, it's really not. And I don't think there's a huge downside to that.
Talk to any flash order cook, cornstarch, you shove it down the back of your pants, keeps everything dry and together. That's the key to wearing this kind of denim for the first time and you don't know what you're up to. Cornstarch your ass and you're going to get through the day. That's my tip for you right there, folks.
Follow us for more life hacks.
This reminds me of a good story about Ernie Eves. The Ontario equivalent of this is the plowing match, where everybody goes and dresses up and does all that. And look, I aspire to have as good a Gordon Gekko-esque haircut as Ernie Eves, but when he was leader and went to the plowing match, it's a pretty well known and conservative, advanced circles story about Ernie, with like a pressed line in his jeans and, coiffed up and as nicely as he could, and a couple of farmers shaking his hands and walking away saying, he smells like a girl. He was wearing a lot of cologne, I guess. I don't know what the case is, but there is always a risk that you come across as not looking authentic.
Not authentic.
You go into
authentic.
Yeah,
that's right.
Not
perhaps,
authentic.
Yeah. Perhaps
it's the authenticity factor. But look, I at the end of the day, I think why everyone goes to this is actually because it is a good party. And it's something that you can put on the political calendar and the taxpayers can pay for your trip out. So like if you're the finance minister for Newfoundland or something, when are you going to get to go to Calgary? You're going to get to go for Stampede. And it becomes an excuse for people to go on a bit of a junket and go to a bit of a party and have some fun. Really.
Yeah. All right.
I think Tim Houston's paying a little price for that back home too right now.
No doubt.
Yeah.
All right, let's swing around to the Hey Yous.
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The Hey Yous are about to begin.
Who's got one?
I do. One. We all do, I think.
Yeah.
Well, then do it, Kory. Do it.
So I'm going to do my Hey You to Elizabeth May. And I want to start my Hey You by saying I think she has done an enormous amount for the Green Party. She really put them on the map. She delivered the one thing that really matters, which is to be able to win some seats. And she's demonstrated the ability to do that, got them into the leaders' debates, not in every case, but like definitely raised the profile of the party to record highs. But as we talk about Biden and Trudeau and people overstaying their welcome and ultimately people who've done a lot of good things for their party needing to move on, I think it's time to thank Elizabeth May for her service. And I think in the interests of the Green Party, they need to find some meaningful leadership transition that allows them to move forward. Like we've seen in other provinces, the Greens do better, like under Mike Schrenner here in Ontario, doing better than they ever have before. It's possible to do that. And anyway, so with all due respect and with respect for her record, hey, Elizabeth, I think it's time to move on.
Kory, I think you're probably right. Despite the fact that she's an exceptionally well-motivated person, I think you're probably right. But I don't think they'll be more successful when she leaves, because I think they're not a serious political party. I think there's nothing about that party that understands what is going on in party politics. It's more of a debating club of people, and I don't see them going anywhere.
I think it's an internal debate they're having, right? Do they want to professionalize or not? And I think it's clearly the not is what's winning out.
What an astonishing moment this ought to be for them, right? You've got a conservative leader who alarms a whole chunk of voters, certainly in the center and on the left. You got a deeply unpopular prime minister who's also the NDP leader tied to absolutely strictly because of this. It should be a monster moment for the Green Party. They should be running at 15% with an aim of trying to gather 1 in 5 votes in this next election. And they are fucking nowheresville because they refuse to be professional.
Yeah.
Well, Ontario, the Greens are doing better than they ever have before. Like they've been pushing 10 points. They won a by-election. Like they're doing better than they have before. And I think that's largely driven by the fact that their leader has some game. But always the same struggle, I think, for the Greens. And you put your finger on it, guys. Like they do they want to actually be serious or not? And the answer is normally not.
Right. Jordan, hey you.
Well, my hey you this week is going out to progressives who are resigned to a Trump presidency. And this is particularly to some of the very hardworking and well-meaning Democratic operatives I spoke to last week, but also to progressives in Canada who resigned to a Poilievre win here, because there are some parallels. And my hey you is just, do not fucking lay down on the tracks. Like, you have to keep fighting. You have to approach this with some energy. And I think that one of the big common denominators in terms of what's not happening is a focus on the future. Like, this is an opportunity. You have to move your campaign past a focus on past accomplishments. The voters are not going to reward that, even if the empirical measures are good, even if the economy is doing better. All those things may be true, but that's not how people feel. You must present a vision for the future. You can't just run this about large ideas like the state of democracy, even if I fully believe that that's what's at stake in the US. That is not proven to motivate voters to you. You have to provide people a vision for a more positive future that impacts their lives right now. And you've got to frame up the stakes for voters that way. And so that is my hey you. It is my prayer. It is my ardent hope that Democrats in the US will see their way to through this moment that I agree is very dark, but to find more energy in it and to pick up and fucking fight. And hopefully some of that energy will come north as well.
All right, there you go. Scott?
My hey you is to David Coletto, Abacus pollster, great guy. We all know him. We all like him. I think his work is really sound. He put together an interesting poll that was released on the weekend, talked about recognition. So running through potential leadership candidates, running through the current federal Liberal cabinet, saying how many people know who these people are. The findings were, I think, what people that are involved in politics would expect, which is virtually no one knows virtually anyone other than the prime minister and the finance minister. So of the potential leadership candidates, Melanie Joly, 20%, Anita Nan, 19%, Mark Carney, 7%, Sean Fraser, 4%, Dom LeBlanc, 4%, Freeland is at 39%. And so, one of the things he says is, what would the impact of a cabinet shuffle be? He says it would be nil because, frankly, most Canadians don't recognize who these ministers are. And so it'll continue to be their opinion of the prime minister that drives party support. He also says that a Liberal leadership race means that it's really hard to predict. And it sort of kind of throws cold water on the idea that, well, if you replace Trudeau with one of these people that no one knows, it's not going to really probably make much difference. I have a small quarrel with that. And then maybe I'm misquoting David or taking his analysis too sharply. But by definition, that's going to happen. You're not going to find that the person is going to be as well known as a person who's been the leader for 13 years and prime minister for the last number of years, 9 years, going on 10. I just think that there is also an opportunity in some of those low numbers. If you look at it and you're thinking about potential prospects, an opportunity to have somebody define, create some enthusiasm and interest around them, you can fill that cup and you can take it from 4 or 7 or even 19% and give people something to think about, give something people to be interested in, attracted to. And by the way, sideline, full circle back to the beginning of the discussion, that is the most compelling argument for why the Democrats need to move as well, because the option on offer is not going to enthuse them. Maybe there's a shot, and yes, it might be a long shot, but maybe there's a shot that somebody else will capture people's attention, turn their head, and attract their vote. So a low recognition in terms of someone's potential to be a future prime minister and catch on, they're not the same thing.
Right.
I agree with that.
Yeah, that same poll gave some reason to believe there's still some time to frame Poilievre with people.
It did, actually, and that's your friend Kyla kind of had the same finding. But of course, you'd have to do something to make that happen.
I know. It's too bad it just won't happen on its own. My hey you goes out to the people around Joe Biden, Anita Dunn, Ron Klain, Jen O'Malley Dillon, the rest of you. You're going to go down in infamy. I mean, it's terrible that you brought us to this state. You should have recognized the situation you were in a year ago and planned a graceful exit from this, but you've jammed us now. And if you insist on going through with this, you are going to go down in infamy as political advisors, and Biden is going to go down in infamy for having blown this. And so you've got a few days left to make the right thing happen here, and it's critical. So,
hey, before we
Amen.
go, who's going to be Trump's VP? And I assume he has to announce it today, Monday. Who's he going to pick?
I think he's picking Vance.
Geraldo Rivera, his name pops to mind because Kory was just mentioning.
Let's not go back to talking about it.
No, we're good. We've done
Canadian, relations. Yeah, I think Vance is probably the front runner, but who knows?
What does he bring?
Guile.
Just bile.
Fork-tongue speaking little
sycophantic admiration for the top of the ticket, which I think is part of what it is. But I think he's looking for a loyalist first and foremost, but then you got to also look at he doesn't want anyone who's ever going to outshine him in any way. So
can't be someone who's a threat.
I don't know. It's who to say, but I'm going to go with Vance as well.
There we go,
David. Who'd you guess? Come on, have fun. Who cares? Predictions are fun.
Well, I don't know. I can't get inside the cretin's mind to figure out what he's thinking and attached to it. So all I know is that the evident strategic choice is Nikki Haley. And I note that she's now speaking at the convention.
I think it's going to be Tom Cotton. I think he's going to pick somebody bland as molasses, and then he can just have a boring, invisible VP because he doesn't want anybody that could possibly compete with him on television.
We'll see.
We'll see. All right. That's our show for today. I would like to thank the three of you for being here. So much fun. I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, Telus, and our sponsor, CN Rail. All you folks who watched or listened. And by the way, a shout out to the YouTubers who rallied to our defense with comments in the last few weeks about the show after my whining and bleating about the hostile nature of the comments on YouTube. Anyway, thanks everybody. We'll see you next week with more of the Curse of Politics. In the meantime, take care of yourselves. See you then.